All right, so for calculating percentages of numbers, there are 3 different ways to calculate it. There's a mental math way, there is a fractional way, and a decimal way. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is going to be the mental math way. Okay, and what we want to think about is how can I split this percentage of 77% of 60, right, into smaller percentages that are easier to think of. Okay, so when I look at 77%, I can break it up into 75% plus 2%. Okay, that's one of the ways I can split it up. And then I recognize that it's probably going to be a bit easier to find each of these percentages. Okay, because we learned all these mental math tricks in class that are going to help us to solve this as we go forward. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put up the rest of these percentages into smaller percentages that we can get. Right? So 2%, we don't know how to get 2% of 60, but we know how to get 1% of 60 and 1% of 60. And then 75%, that one might be challenging, but we know how to get 50%, all right, and 25%, okay, because we know how to get these mental math wise. So the first one we're going to calculate, right, is how do I get 50% of 60? Okay, so 50% of 60 is a new statement. Now 50% of 60, all right, if I had 60 video games and I wanted 50% of them, okay, let's say a customer bought 50% of the video games I own. Okay, well, if I have 60 video games, if they buy 50% of that, 50% of 60 is going to be half of 60. So 50% of 60 is going to be 30 video games. So that person would have bought 30 of my video games. Okay? And the next percentage you want to look at is 25%. And we go, well, 25% of 60, now that might be a little bit harder to think of. Right? You could think of it as a quarter of 60, or you can say, well, I know what 50% of 60 was. It was 30, and I know that 25% is half of 50%. Okay? So then I want to say, well, what's half of 30 then? And we know that that's going to be 15. So 25% of 60 is 15. And then finally, what we need to calculate is 1%. Right? We learned 2 mental math tricks. All right, we said if we're calculating 10%, then we take that decimal and we move it over 1. And if we're calculating 1%, we move that decimal point over 5. So we're looking at 1% of 60. So we're going to put that decimal point at the end. And we're going to move it over 1 spot, 2 spots. Right? So from here, our new value is going to be 0.60 or 0.60. So in this case, 1% is 0.60. Okay, but remember we have it 2 times. Okay, so we have another 1% of 60. Okay, from what we see up here. So when I calculate 1% of 60, we know it's going to be the same number. Okay, so now all we need to do to calculate, if we go back up to the very top, we recognize that to get all of these, add all of these percentages up, all right, that's going to give us 77%. So 50 plus 25 is 75, plus 1 is 77%. So if I just add up all of these numbers here, that's going to give me what 77% of 60 is. Okay? Which in this case, if we add them up, all right, we have 30 plus 15, that's 45, right? And then 45 plus 1.2, okay, because 0.6 plus 0.6 is 1.2, 45 plus 1.2 is going to be 46.20. So 46.20 is going to be 77% of 60, right? So if I wanted to say, okay, if I have 60 video games and customers buy 77% of my video games, well, I'm going to take that 60, I'm going to take out 77%, all right? And that 77%, that's going to be 46 games and 20 little extra, okay? So what that means basically, all right, is this is the number that they would buy, right? And so then I could figure out how many I would have left for that, all right? But 77% of 60 is 46 decimal 20, right? Now that's one way to solve it. The next way to solve 77% of 60, right, is it's using fractions. So what we want to do is we're going to convert the 77% into a fraction. So the reason we know 77% is always out of 100, okay? So I can always make this out of 100. We know that the word of can be replaced by multiplication anytime that we're multiplying. And we also learned in the previous chapter that when we're multiplying by a whole number, that denominator is going to be 1. So then what we need to do is we need to go 77 times 60. So if we take 77 times 60, we're going to get 4,620 over 100. All right, because we know when we're multiplying fractions, all right, all we do is we multiply the tops and we multiply the bottoms. Okay? But now we look at this number and we see this is an improper fraction that we can convert into a mixed number. All right, so what we want to look at is go, okay, well, how many times does 100 fit into 4,620? Right? And it for sure fits in 46 times. There's going to be a little bit left over. All right? So 46 100 times is going to be 4,600. So what we have left is 20 out of 100. Okay? Another way, what I could do, okay, first you could simplify this fraction here. Okay, if you wanted to keep going, leave it as a fraction. Or as a decimal, we know it's going to be 46. And then because it's 20 out of 100, we know that that's going to represent that decimal. So it's going to be 46 decimal 20, which is the same answer that we got in the previous one, except we used a different method for it. And then finally, our last method, right, 77% of 60. Okay? Again, this of is so important when we're calculating percentages of numbers. Okay? This time, though, we're going to convert the 77% into a decimal. All right, and we learned in class that when we're moving stuff from percentage to a decimal, it's like we're dividing by 100, or we're moving that decimal point 2 to the left. So our decimal is going to be 0.77 of becomes times 60. All right, and we said this method was the easiest to do when you have a calculator. Okay, and this is how you can calculate it in a calculator. So I enter 0.77 times 60. All right, 0.77 times 60 is going to give me 46.20, which is the exact same answers that we got in the last two, but we solved it a different way. So for these ones, you have to make sure that you convert to decimals. All right, we are never at any point taking 77 times 60. That would not work. All right, 77 times 60 would give us 4,620. That doesn't make sense, right? I want a percentage of a number. Okay, I can't have 60 video games and 77% of them is 4,000 video games. That doesn't make any sense. So logically, we know that we have to convert it first into a decimal in order to be able to solve questions of this type.